and welcome back to Habits and Healthspan, an Amway podcast. We're so glad that you're tuning in with us again today. My name is Alyssa. As always, I'm here with my co-host, John.
Alyssa, I am super excited for every episode that we're doing, but especially what we're digging into today.
Okay, tell me more. Why?
So, as you know, we'll cue you in at home, we are talking about nutrition today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I shared in our opening episode that one of my interests in Healthspan has to do with the fact that over the past year, I embarked on a bit of a weight loss journey. I lost about 23 pounds total. Then, I actually don't know if you know this, gained most of it back after I got off, then hopped back on. And over the process, I have learned a lot about nutrition. I just generally went through life saying I'm going to eat what I want, eat healthy enough, then I can get away with eating what I want. Decided that didn't work.
It can be blissful for some time.
Mm-hmm.
But
exactly. You get it. But as a result, I started to learn a lot more about the actual composition of foods and how they interact with the body and what they did for this specific diet that I was doing. So I'm so excited to learn a ton more because I still feel like such a novice.
I love it. One thing I love about this podcasting process is that, once again, we're not the experts. We get to learn right alongside with all of our listeners. And today is no exception. We get to do a deep dive into this topic of nutrition and protein. We have Dr. Holiday Durham Zanetti. She is the Senior Nutrition Research Clinical Investigator. We also have Dr. Mary Ann Lila here. She's the Director of Plants for Human Health Institute. And David H. Murdoch, Distinguished Professor, Department of Food, Bioprocessing, and Nutrition Sciences at North Carolina State University. Dr. Mary Ann Lila, welcome to you.
Thank you, and please call me Mary Ann.
You got it. And Dr. Holiday Durham Zanetti, welcome to you also.
Thank you. Please call me Holiday.
Okay, you guys are so great. So great to have you with us. Mary Ann, I just shared your title, but tell us a little bit about your passion for this area of science and in your own words, give us a little bit of information about yourself.
So our institute here at North Carolina State is dedicated to the compounds in plants that are active for human health. There are so many diverse compounds in plants, not only the nutrients, but the bioactive phytochemicals that actually interact in your body to counteract chronic diseases or just to increase metabolism. So we're just concentrating very hard on what those compounds are and how to best use them in daily life.
I love it. And Holiday, in your own words, give us a little information about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a product development scientist at Amway, and I really focus on designing products that really speak to consumer needs and using research. We also run studies, write publications, and also one of the neatest things that I do about my job is provide education on nutrition. I'm also a registered dietitian, so that's been a privilege to be able to do that.
That's so great. Thank you both. I'm excited to pick your brains today. So, John, do you want to start out with a question?
Sometimes there's a lot of things that I have just assumed about health. And one of those things is if you want to be healthy, you want to have a good health span, it is diet and exercise, what you're eating, what you're doing. What I'd love to ask you, Holiday, is why is food so important towards living a healthy life? I know that I have often thought about in terms of good food, bad food. How many calories is this? But why is food so important as we are focusing on our health journeys?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things I think that's important to level set about is lifespan is really the number of years a person lives, and health span is really, the number of years a person lives a healthy life. And in fact, the World Health Organization actually shares that the last 11 years of someone's life, they are actually, in poor health. And this is concerning. But the good news is that nutrition and healthy habits, physical activity actually can close this gap between lifespan and health span. And nutrition plays a key role in that.
Mary Ann, is there anything you'd like to build upon or add?
Yeah, I really appreciate what Holiday has said, because everybody thinks about extending their lifespan, birth to death, womb to tomb. But now that we are living longer, we have every tool at our disposal, just with healthy nutrition and exercise, to make the this span of time be optimal health. So, that is really the key thing, is how do we make our health span, as long as possible. And we can do it. We're not depending on luck or chance. We have all those tools available right here.
One thing, Mary Ann, that I sort of discovered was my relationship with my nutrition was that balance I talked about earlier of what's the maximum amount I can eat of junk food and get away with it.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times, as you mentioned, we're thinking about those last couple years of our lives. That's why I should be eating healthy, or I'm eating healthier because I want to maybe reach a more ideal weight. There must be more to nutrition than just, I want to accomplish this one goal. I want to lose some weight, or I want to have those last 11 years be something else. Can you speak, Mary Ann, to what other impacts good nutrition has on the body?
The nutrition is the fuel for the body that impacts everything, every metabolic process we have. For example, there's a two-way communication going on between your gut and your brain. So your nutrition and the digestion that's happening of foods in your microbiome, in your gut, actually will improve, those metabolites will be able to go up to the brain and improve cognition in an aging brain. And that's what we all want, is when we are aging, not to have a loss of cognitive function. So I think that, we know a lot about nutrients, right? Proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, vitamins and minerals. We know recommended daily allowances, but the phytoactive compounds in a plant, the phytochemicals, the bioactive chemicals that actually will stop in their tracks chronic disease, to help prevent chronic disease or to improve our metabolism. We don't know as much about those, and yet they're all available to us, especially from plant foods, from fruits and vegetables.
That's so great, because sometimes I think, John, you spoke to your journey. I think sometimes, I know all of these things exist when it comes to talking about good nutrition. And, I think we can generally know the basics, but there are some times where I feel like this information is out there, but it's just so hidden. And I don't really know how to discover it, which is great that we can talk to people like you, because you have spent a lot more time and you can enlighten us on these things that can feel so hidden. So, Mary Ann, can you speak a little bit more? You mentioned some of the general things about how nutrition is the fuel for every metabolic process, I think you said. What is the impact? How can our diets impact other aspects of our health, like perhaps our mental? You mentioned the connection with our brains, but our metabolic processes or our skin. Can you get a little bit more specific with how exactly our nutrition and the food that we eat impacts these different systems? And then maybe we can hear from Holiday as well afterwards.
Everything that we eat will actually be digested, and then what shoots into our circulation and gets to all the different targets in our body are actually metabolites of what we ate. Not the compounds that are actually there in the berry or the apple or the broccoli, but metabolites, smaller metabolites that are products of our digestion. And those are the ones that are really critical for having health benefits in our body.
Sorry, Mary Ann, really quickly, what's a metabolite? I'm like, wait, that sounds important.
Yeah, so think about fermentation. When you're making wine, you put the grapes into a vat with bacteria, and it breaks it down into not what was in the grape, but into the fermented product. That's the same, and that's exogenous fermentation. That's fermentation outside your body. Endogenous fermentation is what exactly happens when you get digested, because your food goes down to all those bacteria and microorganisms in your gut, which break them down into smaller compounds, which are available to get into your bloodstream.
Thank you. Back to the original question about how it impacts specifically these other systems like skin and your metabolic system.
So the metabolites of fruits and vegetables or other lean proteins and meats, any of that, those metabolites are what actually are circulating in your system, circulating in your bloodstream. Studies with some of my colleagues here at the Institute, we've worked on supplementing athletes or weekend warriors with nutritious food for a period of 2 weeks. And then at the end of that period of 2 weeks, we've subjected these people to intensive exercise. The athletes have had to run on a treadmill 2.5 hours until they're, almost exhausted, but they'll have to do that. Or just regular people just will do some 45 minutes of brisk walking. And we've measured their blood all along the way, and found that once they do the brisk walking or the vigorous exercise, all of a sudden those metabolites of the good nutritious food that they've been eating are intensified in the bloodstream. The concentrations are skyrocket. There's a surge of healthy metabolites into the bloodstream when you move. They go together. The gut is really the center of everything. If your gut is happy, it helps all parts of your body.
Holiday, would you add anything to that as far as how our diets impact other aspects of our health?
I definitely echo Mary Ann's thoughts. And, I think good nutrition directly impacts physical health and, by supporting our immune system, promoting healthy metabolism, maintaining body composition and tissue repair. And I think there's a fun fact, the brain consumes about 20% of our body's total energy. So it relies heavily on this constant supply of nutrients to function optimally. And we want to feed our bodies with good nutrition in order for us to optimally function, right? Whether we're talking about mental health, like Mary Ann mentioned, there's a direct link between our nutrition and our mental health. It's a bit complex, but when we're not eating healthy, we often see a decline in our cognition, our memory, learning, and also metabolic health, right? Like when we're feeding our body a diet of processed foods and high sugar and healthy fats, it definitely promotes, obesity and insulin resistance and even type 2 diabetes. So, making sure that we're incorporating foods that are high in fiber, healthy fats that are lower in sugar, definitely, they definitely play into this, right? And to the point of skin health, we often don't think about skin health and nutrition, but they are definitely linked. And, as Mary Ann mentioned, they play a very big role in terms of the impact of our skin. And maybe we're not seeing it on a daily basis, but over time it certainly impacts, especially if we're living in an environment that is polluted or that has, that our diet isn't as healthy. We definitely see, the results of that when we don't take care of our nutrition.
So, I'm a big, strong advocate of plant-based nutrition because there's so many wonderful things to say about that, plant proteins and other active compounds in plants. But I'm not a vegetarian. I'm not a vegan. The important thing in the diet is to vary it, to make sure it's habitual. Every day you're eating good nutrition. And it's varied, so you're not just eating the same old thing every day. You're eating a variety of different foods that are nutritious. Then you're okay. Then you're going to be okay in terms of your health. Can you cheat a little bit? Can you eat the popcorn? Sure, it's fine. But just as long as you have in mind that you want the daily, habitual, and varied nutrition to be the backbone of your diet.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think we often hear, everything in moderation, but I think that there's certainly some truth to that. And when we start saying, you can't have junk food or you can't do this and that, it actually, turns it the opposite, because then that's what we always want. We're always focused on that. So I think the can't have is something we need to take out of our vocabulary and just say, yeah, you can have it, but it needs to be in moderation. And, you shouldn't deprive yourself. Yeah.
Because you'll fall off the wagon.
That's exactly right.
This is so good to hear from these experts, that moderation. I love it. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that is certainly an aspect of nutrition. But Holiday, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit. I want to shift gears to protein and talk specifically, maybe if you can tell us what is protein and then why is protein so important?
Yeah, so protein is a macronutrient at a very basic level. It's composed of amino acids, and these are the building blocks necessary for growth, for repair, maintenance of tissues. I kind of like to think of it as like Legos or building blocks. So you have the amino acids as the blocks, and then the protein is the structure. And it's essential for the majority of our cellular function. It's really important. And, there's essential amino acids, and that means that you have to get them from your diet. There's no other way to get them. And then there's non-essential, and those are the amino acids that our body makes. So when, we're out getting our protein, often we're thinking about those amino acids that we have to get from our diet. And there's about 9 of those. And, you can get them from various sources, whether it's plant-based or animal-based. But they play a huge role in our body and our physiological functions.
So, Holiday, as I was embarking on my weight loss journey, protein was a pretty big part of the specific diet that I did. And I know a lot of times prior to that, when I hear the word protein, I think of those guys at the gyms who are getting their protein shakes. And I think of it in terms of a lot of like muscle building, working out. Can you speak a little bit about the role of protein, maybe for, I like that term that you used earlier, Mary Ann, the weekend warrior, or just the person that maybe not trying to build, they're just trying to have a healthier health span?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times you're right. We think about the athlete, but when we're thinking about just the weekend warrior, kind of a good number to keep in mind is if you want to kind of get an estimate about how much protein you need. You can calculate it. It's kind of an interesting calculation. It's 0.36 grams per pound of body weight. So you can take your weight and multiply it by 0.36 and get kind of an estimate about how much you would need. But obviously there's a number of variables that play into that, whether your age, kind of your goals, and your gender even plays into it. It's an approximation, but obviously if you are exercising, strength training, you probably want to bump it up some. And also just keeping in mind that, when you're consuming excess protein, it's still excess calories. So, you can still gain weight if you're not using it when you're exercising or, being physically active. And I think that that's something that people don't take into consideration, but it's also very important that you have enough to build muscle and also to support your body.
So you mentioned excess protein. Is there any such thing as too much if you're okay with that caloric addition?
You want to stay in the range of that 0.36 grams per pound of body weight. But yeah, there can be excess, and that's not good for your kidneys. So if you are consuming a lot of protein or, more than that, you might want to think about not consuming as much or drinking more water. And also there's considerations in terms of dehydration, kidney function, GI issues, even bad breath if you're consuming too much. But that's typically pretty rare, I would say. But, again, like if you are consuming a lot, keeping in mind calories are calories, right? If you're not using them.
Interesting. I hear so much these days. It's like the new buzzword. It's like plant-based protein. What's the difference? And are they the same? Like, is there one that's better than the other?
Yeah, Mary Ann, you mentioned earlier specifically that this is something that really excites you. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons that people will go with plant proteins. It's more sustainable. They might care about animal welfare, and so they want to go with a plant-based source. But plants actually can have the broad range of amino acids that are, the 9 amino acids that are essential that our body can't make. A lot of times, plants will not have the complete range of 9. But that's okay, because if you have a varied diet and you're eating more than one source of plant protein, you're covering all your bases without even having to think about it. Like quinoa. Quinoa has all the essential amino acids, and so do soy products like tofu or tempeh. But let's say you're having a peanut butter sandwich. The wheat bread, that has good protein, but it's really low in lysine. But the peanut butter takes care of that. It's loaded with lysine, so you're fine. Same with beans and rice. Same with pita chips and hummus. You have those 2 sources of plant protein. You're covering all your bases, and that's all you need to do so you don't really have to think about it and calculate. Just vary your diet, be diverse and be habitual daily, and you're gonna have the good nutrition that you're looking for.
What I love about your answer, Mary Ann, was you brought it into the realm of the specific. As you were talking about plant-based protein, you must have read my mind, because I'm thinking, what are the plant-based proteins? You mentioned peanut butter, and that was probably the only one I could think of. I was like, maybe some legumes. If some of our listeners are trying to make all of your great advice a little bit more practical, what's a good way that perhaps that they could self-educate in terms of making it choices with specific foods as far as plant-based protein go?
So beans, nuts are, you're talking about plant-based, yeah. So beans, whole grains, lean meat and fish is great. If you're not going, or whey is great for non-plant proteins. Chickpeas, Greek yogurt. There's so many sources of good protein-rich plant-based foods that you can easily cover, because you don't need that much, really. As Holiday mentioned, it's only a little over 1/3 of a gram per pound in your body, so that's a little handful, really. So you can cover it pretty easily just by varying your diet.
So, Mary Ann, you mentioned the word botanicals, and I'm curious, maybe Holiday, you could answer kind of high level, how do botanicals help the absorption of proteins into the body?
So we know that certain botanicals like ginger or turmeric or even fenugreek, they actually contain compounds that may support the digestion and the nutrient absorption of things like protein. So for instance, ginger has been shown to enhance digestive enzyme activity, which helps our bodies absorb amino acids more efficiently. So, and we've seen this with herbs as well. So it's kind of this neat property that proteins have in terms of helping, or a neat property that botanicals have that help the absorption and digestion of protein.
Nice. So it not only is good for you, but it can really enhance the flavor of things too.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Sort of connected to that, what exactly within the body helps to activate the proteins? Holiday, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
There's digestive enzymes in the stomach and small intestine like pepsin and trypsin that help break down dietary proteins into amino acids and allow them to be utilized by the cells. So, these botanicals actually help enhance that process.
Another one is your immune system. There are proteins that get activated by your immune system that specifically will attack invaders, whether it be a pathogen or a toxin. And that's an example of a protein getting activated by your immune system to do work in your body to protect your health.
So one thing that we learned about last episode was all about gut health. Could you maybe tie together for us, how does nutrition interact with gut health? It doesn't have to be protein specifically, although if that touches on it, great. But I'd love to see that crossover as we get more of a holistic picture of the human body from episode to episode.
Again, there's that two-way communication between the gut and the brain, and the circulation of metabolites from nutrition that are just going all throughout the body. And those metabolites are coming after digestion at the gut level. So, for example, proteins. Let's just take proteins as an example. We think about proteins, most consumers will think about proteins as something that builds muscle, which it does, but they don't think that proteins are also antibodies. Proteins are the antibodies that'll ward off a disease organism or a pathogen that's getting in your body. Proteins are also enzymes that will catalyze a reaction in your body, make it go more smoothly. Proteins send messages from one part of your body to another, and they'll be structural. So the proteins there are doing so many different things. That's why they are really, really critical for human health maintenance, besides just being a fuel for your body.
In terms of just like their activity in the gut, right? Like they help repair the gut lining, they help facilitate healthy bacteria and kind of that good microbiome. So they have a number of roles physiologically, but also when we think about just kind of the makeup, the composition of our gut microbiome, which is really important, which we often don't connect to protein.
So now, Alyssa, as we're sort of getting close to the end of the podcast, we are approaching a part that I love to talk about. At the end, we like to ask the guests for some really actionable steps, tips that they'd offer to someone who's maybe just starting out about getting intentional about their Healthspan journey. I've been taking these action steps and applying it, and it's kind of cool to go, yep, it works.
Yeah. I joked with you before this that we should take before and after pictures and see how much we're actually applying and see if it makes a difference at the end of all of these podcasts where we're gleaning all this information. But I agree. This is something that I think I really appreciate hearing from both of you. So just sort of to wrap up our time together today, we know that we are born with certain genetic predispositions, right? So there's an element of our health that is handed to us, right? We also know and are learning that our healthy habits really do make an impact. And Mary Ann, that's kind of where you started us with saying there is information that is available to us. There are things we can do to really affect our health span. So what are one or two things that somebody can do if they're just starting out on this journey of nutrition and protein and diet? Mary Ann, let's start with you.
You don't have to be a scientist to get the most out of nutrition. You don't have to do a bunch of research and know the names of all the phytochemicals in food. I think three simple ways to just get the most out of nutrition and diet. Eat like your ancestors. You know, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. They were out there, they ate a great variety of different foods, diversified different foods. So if we think about whole foods and eating like our ancestors did, we're going to our ancestors had a wonderful diet. They had a wonderful, very healthy. And then when we had the agricultural revolution 12,000 years ago, farmers and the population, it grew. It helped us to increase our populations, but people started eating the same food, like rice every day, wheat every day. No, I mean, our hunter-gatherer ancestors were varied their diet, and that made all the difference. The second thing is to eat your colors. You don't have to think about what's in the fruit or vegetable. A color is a wonderful biomarker that there are compounds in there that are wonderful for your health. So eat like your ancestors, eat your colors, and move. Make sure that you've got some exertion. You don't have to work out all the time, but just make sure there's some movement, some simple walking that's part of your routine. It's going to make a huge difference in how well those foods will get into your body.
Incredible. And Holiday?
To echo what Mary Ann said about eating like your ancestors, just having a plant-forward diet. So incorporating those plants that are so vital that, we know have antioxidants, also incorporating healthy fats, limiting processed foods. Also, I think, often we think about our habits and kind of they're set in stone, but habits can change and you're really setting yourself up for quality of life later on. So I think that that's really important to you can change your habits. You don't have to be a scientist, like Mary Ann said. And, there's a lot of really good options to have a healthy plant-forward diet.
That's so great. It's so empowering, right? Because we can't change our genetics, but we can change our habits. And then I also hear you saying, habits don't necessarily change overnight, but consistency is key, and that's something active that we can do, and it takes time. So that's really great. I love that.
Well, a huge thank you to both of you, Mary Ann, Holiday, for being with us today, sharing your expertise. And thank you to all of you listeners at home for joining us on your Healthspan journey. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow Amway on Facebook and Instagram. And remember, variety is the spice of life, but it also is key to a nutritious health span. See you next time.
See ya.